as in not your current family, but the family you grew up with.
Hmm.
What do you know about your grandparents and how they lived?
Well, I knew my grandmothers, and I guess they both died when I was. My dad's mom died when I was in high school, and my other grandmother died when I was probably in my 30s or maybe even 40s. So I knew them well. The grandfathers I didn't know at all. They were both dead before I was born, um, and so I didn't know. But Graham Widman lived in Teaneck, on Oakdean Avenue, 138 Oakdean. Boy, I wonder where that comes from. But she lived there. She had a very deep Swedish accent. She had come over as a teenager, single, and they had 7 children. One died in her 20s, and the others all went on, to full adulthood. They were. She ran a. She was very much an avid Christian, but not in an objectionable way. But that was just her belief, and she came out of the Swedish church, which was sort of a state church, a Lutheran background, and sort of formal and what I would call sort of not dead, but almost dead, you know, comatose. Uh, but she was not that way, and so I guess she had been, I don't know really what her church background was. It was probably in some free church, which they had there, which was more active, more vital, more responsive, but not supported by the state. And she came over from Sweden. They met in Brooklyn, where the Swedes all went, and I'm sure they went to a church like that there. Then they married, went to New Jersey, and they were in, I don't know what kind of churches, but most of the people went to the Baptist church. They weren't denominationally strong. And they had come out of Jersey City too, I think, and there might have been some other church there. The family was very close knit. We always had Christmas at her house. It was those aunts and uncles, all the Widmans, really hung together in a very healthy, joyous way. Did their own things. They were all very different, but and there was one Uncle Carl, the eldest son, had had a nervous breakdown. I guess he had been very wealthy in the pre-Depression, and then lost all his money in the Depression. And but they put up with him, and he smoked and drank, which everybody frowned on, and used bad language, and but they never forgot him, and they were always over at his house at Christmas time. They went visiting. Now the other family was my grandmother I told you about before, but she had come over. She didn't have an independent family at the time I knew her. She raised her kids. They became adults. She came to live with us. They too always stayed in touch, and there was a lot of closeness there. And their children I still, am active with or in touch with, even though they're spread all over. So that was their family. So it was a wonderful family structure in that they enjoyed each other, they had a responsibility for each other, and they celebrated life at Christmas and Thanksgiving and picnics and the usual things that mean stuff, birthday parties, that means something to everybody.
Right. And speaking of your mother and father, how are your mother and father different? Not from your grandparents, but from each other.
Well, my mother was very quiet, a little artistic, but very peaceable, quiet, easygoing person. My father was more, he wasn't uptight. He was a fun-loving guy. He liked people. He was generous. Um, but he also could get a little up tense, and we used to laugh. The kids always laugh at their parents. He would not find things, and he would shout, "My pen! My pen! Where's my pen? Someone took my pen. It's not here. Where is my pen?" That was the way he reacted oftentimes. So we, of course, made a lot of fun of him and occasionally hid things of his so that he would have an opportunity. But he was one of the most generous people I have ever known. He was generous with friends. He was generous with customers, with people at work. If there was anybody who needed something, he would try and see that they got it, and he would try and hide the fact that he had been able to do this. You know, he didn't want any credit. He didn't even want to be known. And there were many times it bothered me as a kid because he would say to people, maybe they were a pastor or somebody who needed a bed and they didn't have enough money to buy a bed for the child, and so this was a need. And he would go often, and I was there, silent, but there as a kid. And he would say, you know, I was through our warehouse just the other day, and we have a bed that was going to send to the Statler Hotel, but somehow they had not built enough rooms, so they converted one of the rooms into a pantry, and so this bed is left over, and they don't want it. Would you be interested in it? And of course, the people said, God has answered our prayers, which was probably true. But I used to say to myself, now my dad is lying to these people, and you shouldn't be lying to people. So I saw the terrible choice of being completely honest, or we're saving these people's face, you know, not having them feel obligated to this guy. That's the kind of person he was. So I have to admire it, although I never, he sometimes, well, all the Widmans did this. They sometimes, what was I said about my aunt?
Wouldn't let truth get in the way of a good story?
That's right. They wouldn't let truth get in the way of a good story. My dad would say, there's a plane going over now. I was a kid. Look at that. Look at that, son. He used to call me Buddy. Look at that, Buddy. That's the mail plane. I said, yeah? How do you know it's the mail plane? I mean, it's so far up. Neither of us can tell what it is. It's a plane. But he always did that. He had explanations for questions I hadn't asked rather. So, well, that was my dad. My mother was very calm, very loving, a little artistic, played the piano, did paintings and whatnot. Totally different. And once in a while she'd get very frustrated, and once in a while she would throw something at my father. So she had a temper buried deeply.
All right. Okay, now I'm going to ask you some reflective questions. Describe a time and place where you remember feeling truly at peace and happy to be alive.
Well, let's see. What is today? April the 10th. I feel very happy and peaceful and glad to be alive right at this very moment.
There you go. Is there anything that you have always wanted to do but haven't?
Oh, there's 1,000 things I wanted to do. I would still like to fly a plane. I had one lesson 40 years ago. Yeah, I would like to go to every spot on the globe, but most of that stuff is out of reach, or maybe I don't want to expend the energy or the money to do all of that. Is there anything I'm dying to do? I don't think there really is. Fortunately, we're at the perfect point of life. It's too bad you have to die when you get to this point. But the fact is, Marge and I have more money than we need. You know, we have a great house that I like. I have my dog, who's perfect. And we're able to go places, and have gone to a lot of places I would like to see. And there's a lot more places, but you know, if I went out every week, I'd never see every place. And so the place I'd really like to see, I don't have any unfulfilled wishes, you know. And I can't think of a place right offhand that I'd like to go to China and see that culture, but do I want to make the effort or spend the money? I guess I don't.
Describe any of your favorite memories with your family.
Well, I have one. The only thing that surfaces instantly is I remember Christmas when I was dying to get a train set. You know what boys and trains are. And this was in the 40s. Lionel made trains. I probably had some sort of toy of that kind, but I didn't have electric trains. And so I had pleaded with my parents and gone through this whole deal. And my dad usually was a sucker anyway. He would give you pretty much what you wanted if it wasn't too dangerous, even if it was shooting a 22 rifle. But I wanted trains badly. And he kept saying, well, they're very expensive. And he took me to the store. He used to take me into the city during Christmas time. And I used to have a great time because there was a black guy there, George Minnis. And maybe my feeling for black people was affected by George, for all I know. But he was, in those days, the only job for people in Manhattan was sweeping floors, literal porters. Men had no work at all, at least I don't remember it. And I see those things from the perspective of seeing them 50 years ago as a child, not observing the facts, but now I can recall the men. But George and my dad liked George. And George was a funny guy. And he just swept up. He was the only black person in the whole organization, in fact, in the whole city of New York, as far as I knew. But he used to take me to the 5 and 10. And my dad said to George, will buy you a gift, and so on. He kept putting off this gift of the trains that I wanted. And Christmas came, we had all these gifts, and they would open them up and open them up, and then finally the gifts were all gone. And my dad said, well, I guess we've given out all the gifts. Well, I could read him, and there was something behind that statement, even though I was probably 10 or less. But I could, and I knew there must be trains, but there was the possibility there wasn't, and you're in that fix. And then he said, oh, look here, behind this chair, there's another box. And he brought it out, and then I knew I had it made. That was one of the great moments of life. I still have those trains. They're down in the basement. They still work. They're 50 years old. Every once in a great while, I get them out.
Probably more than 50 years old.
You're right. They're over 60 years old. You're right. Time flies when you're having a lot of fun.
Who was the person who had the most positive influence on your life?
Oh, that truly is hard because so many people, to point out one is almost impossible, but I could probably point out 20 that had a very significant effect. Certainly my mother and my father. I truly think, and I've thought about it a number of times, so I guess this is the right answer. I think my grandmother. And she affects me, I guess. And I don't truly know why, but looking back, I think she had a greater influence than my parents. I know she loved me. My parents loved me. Aunts and uncles loved me. But my grandmother was always there. I know she always prayed for me. I know it was the joy of her life. For a kid, that doesn't mean much. But when you're 70, that means a whole lot, And I think I would have to say she had the greatest influence. And I can't describe what that was or how that was, but I think her love and her care. The same thing could be said for my parents. The same thing could be said for my aunts and uncles, many of them. And there's lots of people who are not related to me who've had just a wonderful, wonderful effect on my life. But, each story is different, and each is quite complex. And I'd have to name 20 anyway, and maybe 50 to really do justice to the question.
What is love to you?
I can see you're intent on making me cry. I don't know if I can define that at all. Any more than I can define God, because, I guess it's unknowable. You know when you feel it, but you don't know what it is or how it came to be, you know, literally. I love Marge. I love my kids. I was going to say I love you, which I do. Maybe in differing degrees. I really don't know. But I love a lot of people. And I see that as a great advantage, you know. I can enjoy people. I can love people I work with. And because I love them, I can forgive them when they do disastrous things, which they do. And that happens with your children mostly, you know. They do things you wish they never did, but you still love them in spite of it. And that gives you the ability to forgive. And I guess that love comes from God. If it's a gift of God, I think. But why or how, I don't know. Seems like an incomplete answer. But I don't know if it is.
If you had the chance to change the past events of your life, what would you change?
I don't know. You know, there were plenty of things I suppose I wished didn't happen. But if it didn't happen, life wouldn't be. I wouldn't be here at this moment this way. Uh, so I have to say, I don't know that I want to change anything. I think life comes to us, and disasters come to us. There have been times when I've lost a lot of money, and I was sorry to see it go. But you know, do you say, well, I wish that didn't happen? I don't think so. I think, you know, effort and pain and a lot of other things sometimes make us stronger and make us richer in a lot of experience. The Army was a thing that was probably a good example because Marge and I were just married about a year. We had bought a house 6 months. That itself is a story. But and I was drafted, and the Army was the last thing I wanted. I had just started work. I didn't want to go into the Army, but the war was on. I was drafted, and we went. And I went to California, and she came out to California. And she got pregnant in California, and I met guys in California who just had a wonderful effect on my life, and I never would have met if it hadn't been for the Army. And I went to Germany, and I went to Spain, and I did a lot of things that I see in looking back, like going into the Army was a wonderful thing. Even being drafted was a wonderful thing. And would I change it? Now I would say no. I would want to go to Germany. I probably never would have gotten to Germany. I never would have gotten to California. We lived there a year. There's a lot of things I wouldn't have seen or done. And so I think you have to accept the difficult days. Unfortunately, I don't think we've had any disasters that were, you know, non-recoverable. If I had a child that I had backed over with my car, I'm sure I would say that's an event that I didn't want to happen and I couldn't live through. But the ones I've had have been minor and I think strengthening and realistic. So I think hard times are part of living life.
And this is a similar question, but let me read it. Thinking of your life as a timeline, what were the major crossroads or things that changed your life and made you who you are today? Not that you just talked about something like the Army and so on, but other...
Yeah, I think there were some major events, and some that were unplanned, you know, like going to the Baptist church where I met Marge, a major event, although I didn't recognize it. But I don't know that. I think one thing was going to Wheaton College. That changed my life in a lot. I only went 2 years, and I wish I had gone 4 years, but I wanted to get married, and that was much higher priority. And it was a better choice, or at least it was a good choice. I could have gone the 4 years and been married. I wish my parents had stepped forward and said, look, you two ought to be married. She can get a job, you can live at college. In those days, that didn't happen much. But going to Wheaton was a life-changing event in many, many ways. It was a Christian college, but it was open to all questions, and it was for a firm faith, but it, as one fellow said, we have to find the truth. We don't know where it leads, but God himself, herself, whatever it is, God is truth. And so we can't be afraid of the truth. We want to embrace it. We want to discover it. That wasn't you, was it? It was some bird out there. And so that was a life-changing event. The Army was a life-changing event. Having children was very much a life-changing event. And changing jobs was a life-changing event. Each job was very different, had all kinds of challenges and led us in different directions. And even moving here, I don't know that that was really as life-changing, though. It's a nice place. It was a big event in our life. But I think those primary things that probably the ones.
Two more. Is there anything that you would like to talk about that I haven't asked?
I can't imagine.
Right.
The only question I might have is, when is this going to be over?
One more question.
Okay.
Is there any message that you would like to say to your family in closing?
Goodbye. I don't know. I love my family. That's hard to describe. Everybody says it. And it can't logically be defined. I think it has to be felt. I think as I've grown older, I've gained some wisdom in that area, that I used to be geared to the facts and information. That was everything. If it was about planes, I wanted to know what held them up there. What are the laws of physics? If it was business, how much money does people want to spend, and how can we get this accomplished? So all my life's been about facts and details, but through a great problem my son had, I came to realize that I have human feelings inside me. And that was absolutely a revelation. In fact, that's one of the great events of life that I should have mentioned, I guess. And I found that I had feelings inside, often of fear that I wasn't recognizing. I was trying to determine how we could stop or move or do these things. And it made me a lot more human to look inside and recognize my emotions, which I never had done. And I find it very rich and very profitable. And part of it is aging. I guess you see life from another perspective. But I called a guy on the telephone today, a good friend of mine. I haven't seen him in months. He said, let's get together for coffee Thursday. I said, terrific. And we set a date. Now, years ago, I wouldn't have done that. And I know that when I see him, we're going down to Borders, the bookstore, and we'll both put our arms around each other and embrace. Years ago, that was unthinkable. But in a real way, I love that man, and I love hundreds of other people, and I've learned I can express that love. I can put my arms around and kiss a gal on the cheek, and say, I want to reach out and I want to touch you. I don't want to be 2 feet away from you. And I think that's been the joy of being older, either having the freedom to do it because I'm not dangerous in any other way. But it is absolutely a joy. And I can take the time and say the problems of life, the shortcomings of these people aren't all that important. I can love them the way they are, even if they make my hair stand up once in a while. And I think that's terrific. I'm happy. I'm ready to go, as a matter of fact. My only wish is that it not be long and drawn out and ugly. But I really am at peace with myself and the world, and not everything's the way I want it, but I recognize that it never will be. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yep. All right.
Good enough.